afternoon, Namibia and the world, and welcome to our session here at the Government Information Center. I am your host for the afternoon, and my name is Shianwa Desire Kahiha. It is a fresh month. It's new, it's spring, and the birds are chirping, and the heat is definitely giving us that introduction into our spring. As we gain that introduction from our weather, we would also like to start the month off with something that is quite needed in our society, whether just by the general person or even your academic. It is what we call financial literacy. And in the studio, I have a panelist here that will be assisting us to divulge into this topic, and hopefully somebody can take something away that they needed to know. I have Mr. Francois Brandt in the studio, and he's the Deputy Executive Director for the Procurement Policy Unit at the Ministry of Finance. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for being with us.
Be here. Thank you.
As we said, finances are one of those topics that nobody really wants to touch, but at the same time it affects our lives on a daily, whether you're buying a lollipop in a shop or you're buying some bulk stock for some retail. And at this point, we would like to find out from you, what is financial literacy? Why is it important? And what is the most important aspect thereof?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. It's a topic that you can literally speak for days upon. So when we started the Financial Literacy Initiative in Namibia many years ago, we realized that financial literacy is such a limited term, actually, because when you study financial literacy or financial wellness, you start to realize that when you do your studies, financial wellness, maybe as a term of financial capability, consists of financial literacy, meaning your knowledge, what you know about finances, your education, what you've been taught, of what you've observed, so the things that you know. But it must be complemented by your attitudes towards finance. So that comes into, I believe there will be more money in the future, I don't need to save now. Money is readily available. Or, you know, some of us grow up very badly or poorly, so there's never enough money. I will never have money, so I need to keep on saving it, I keep on keeping it. And then there's, of course, in addition to the attitude, it affects your behavior. And there's very nice examples of this. So when we did our survey in 2013, we realized that the financial literacy rate in Namibia was 42.75%. But when we tested the knowledge component, it was 52%. When we tested the behavioral component, it was 32%. So that showed to us that we know we should, for example, save, but we don't save. We know that we should not buy that takeaway late at night on the way home because I did not budget for it. But, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to go make food, so I buy that takeaway knowing that my budget cannot afford it. So our behavior does not always follow our knowledge. So it's not just about learning more about finances, it's also about changing our behaviors and our attitudes to complement what we know.
Okay. There are different elements of saving and different terminologies that are used by the financial institutions, by the academics, and so on. But sometimes us on the street, we're not quite sure what these mean. And hence now we ask the next question, which is, what is the difference between savings and investments? And what are their benefits?
Okay, so in some instances it's one and the same. But what it comes down to in its essence and most basic aspect is that you're taking a little bit of the money that you have, that you receive every month, and you're putting it aside, or money that you've received through a bonus or inheritance, you don't utilize it, you're putting it one side. Now when we talk towards savings, it's a bit more of a short-term thinking. You're putting money aside maybe to use within the next 3, 6 or 12 months. So it's money that's readily available, it's probably in cash, it's probably in a savings account, in a piggy bank, in a 32-day account, something that you can get access to quite quickly. Investment and on your savings, your interest rates are normally very low. And probably doesn't even cover your bank charges. So, but when you think about investment, that's when you take that same money and you put it into something with a bit of a long-term focus. So I put it into property, I put it into a business endeavor, I put it into an investment, long-term investments, whether it's unit trust or mutual funds or any others, with the aim that this money will stay there and somehow increase in value or somehow earn interest or dividends for me.
Okay.
And so it's a longer term perspective with the aim of increasing in value as well.
Okay. Just let me see if I get this correctly. So basically, your investments can have a higher rate, but it has a potential of dividends and returns.
Yeah, so it depends tremendously on your options that you take. So
Yeah.
investments, the longer the investment, the safer it is normally, and then the interest rate is also a bit lower.
Okay.
Where your more short-term or higher interest rate options available has higher risk.
Uh-huh.
So it depends on the products that you use. But what I'm trying to say with that there's a bit of a higher interest is that normally with savings, there's no real interest.
Okay.
So if you put it at home, of course it doesn't increase in value.
Okay.
If you put it into a savings account and you measure the interest rate on the savings account, less any bank charges, you will also have to see whether there's any real interest. Now with a 32-day account, again, there's a bit of interest.
Okay.
That's already a bit more than something that's readily available. And that's
Yes.
because the banks and financial institutions actually take your money, invest it somewhere where it generates a revenue return,
Yeah.
which can then be distributed to the pool.
Okay, okay. I'm learning something new today. And hopefully you are also open to the education that we're bringing this afternoon. As we said, it's one of those topics that really, as Francois said, we will never finish when we start discussing about it. But it's also one that sometimes is seen to be a very sensitive one because everybody wants to kind of keep their financial situation as a private matter. But the education thereof, the literacy thereof is something that we should actually get into, gorging more into, and maybe you will learn something from me and I learn something from you. Remember, we are live streaming from our social media platforms, and it is on these very same platforms that you can give us your comments, what your thoughts are on financial literacy. If you have a question, you can also pose these questions on these very same platforms. On Facebook, you can find us at the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, Republic of Namibia. That is on Facebook, Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, Republic of Namibia. We are also available on our YouTube platform, and our handle there is MICT Namibia, MICT Namibia. While we wait for you to join the conversation, we continue here in the studio with Francois, and our next question basically speaks to what are the long-term and short-term investment vehicles available to an ordinary Namibian? Just the basics that somebody can maybe consider looking into.
So I think one of the other panelists that was supposed to be would be able to give very much product knowledge on the short-term and long-term vehicles available. So you have your unit trust and your mutual funds, the annuities that you invest for many years into the future, and that becomes available after 20 or 30 years. There's specifically developed products and vehicles, for example, if you want to prepare for a student. So you invest into a student fund for your children in the future, pension fund. So there's these different types of vehicles available for the purposes that you have. There's also these short-term investments that you can do. For example, you can put it into these 30-day accounts, or you can put it into even into stocks and into shares, which you can sell at any time that you want. But maybe one of the lesser known ones available to Namibia, not from an investment point of view, but from a savings point of view, is something called the Savings and Credit Cooperative. And this is under the Ministry of Agriculture, and they are the regulatory authority, and they regulate normal agricultural cooperatives, but they also regulate savings and credit cooperatives. And that's where you can start saving together as groups or communities or families. And from this group savings, you can then borrow at a very low interest rate, which you determine because it's your money and it's your group. So you set the parameters. What are these loans for? How do we monitor it? How do we keep you accountable? At what interest rate? And then we start taking control a little bit of our finances. So this is where we start working together on these elements. So with the investments, we always advise people, go speak to registered financial advisors. Because they are in the field, they know our products are performing day by day or over the last week, 10 years or 20 years. And they are the ones giving you the options also based on your risk appetite. Because some people say, but these long-term investments and I'm only getting a 4%, it doesn't make sense to me at all. I want you to try putting it into something that might have a higher risk of return, even though the risk is a bit more. So they do a risk appetite analysis of an individual and see what is your risk appetite. What are the sort of investments that would interest you? So those that are high risk takers, you would see them playing around with cryptocurrencies, with gold and silver and platinum, starting their own businesses and hustles.
Yeah.
Then those with a lower risk appetite who don't really, they don't want to lose any of their money, but they're
Yeah.
okay with taking a little bit of interest.
Yeah.
So they would invest them in unit trusts and mutual funds and long-term investments. So it also depends very much on the person and in the individual.
Yeah. We stay with something that's similar to that. From your experiences and your maybe also personal opinion, how do you believe one can strike a good balance between the long and the short-term financial goals?
Okay, again, I would say this depends from person to person, but it
Yeah.
also depends on what stage of life you are in. Those people who have families, they've married, they have children, they might want a long-term strategy
Yeah.
because they have to take their children through school, potentially through university. They have to think about their old age, about their health in the long term. So their long-term strategy would then be the main focus, while a short-term strategy might be that I'm investing 80% of my money into the long term, but 20% I still want to try on something else that might have a bigger rate of return for me in the short term.
Okay.
And so they might take that balance. But if you're a young person, you're 20, you're just out of school, you're getting into a job, you have some extra cash, you're not that interested necessarily in the long term. You don't have kids, you're not married, you're not even thinking about retirement. You want to play the system, so you're saying, okay, I want to start looking at other options that's around.
Yeah.
They make dangerous decisions, especially with untested markets like cryptocurrencies. And then you have all these multi-level media marketing schemes, and you don't know if it's a pyramid scheme or not, and it's so confusing. But people are willing to try because you're trying to risk it. So it depends who the person is. But I think more importantly, you need to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve in life. So if you want to, in the future, have a home, I mean, that's a very big investment.
Yeah.
So you have to save up for that, invest up for that. If it is that you want to retire debt-free, then you start looking at it from that perspective. If you're saying, no, one day I want to own my own farm, I want to be a farmer, I want to leave civil service, I want to leave my job somewhere. I'm saving up, not to invest in a house, I'm not saving up for retirement. I want to go and start my life as a farmer and build that into a successful business that will sustain me into retirement. So people need to start understanding what it is that they want to achieve in the future. But as you said, and I think this is a very important point, it's a taboo in Namibia to talk about money. We don't talk about money unless we complain about money, or if we ask for money, or if we lie about money. So that's when we talk about money. But having a serious discussion about my financial situation, you don't see it. Not even when people are at their most vulnerable, not even when they are drunk, do you see them talking about money.
That's true.
And it's heartbreaking because the issues of money leads to a lot of social problems. It leads to substance abuse because of the financial stresses that's put upon us. It leads to, and I'm sorry to say this, but I don't think we talk about it, gender-based violence. How many of those fights start about money? How many of those couples are not on the same page when it comes to their money, and the fights start because money was misspent or stolen, or I don't know what you're doing with our money. And these discussions doesn't create a conducive atmosphere. And somehow his money is not my money, but we are married. But we need to somehow be able to sit around the table. And the fact that we don't do it results that our children don't know how to deal with it.
Exactly.
So where do they learn about it?
Thank
The
you.
media and personalities out there who flaunt money like it falls out of the air.
Exactly.
And I think that creates a wrong expectation because now we become a bit entitled. When I start my job, I need to start here. I need to be able to drive this. I need to be able to... and it creates so much pressure on people. And then it creates this very unhealthy culture of blessers and blessees. Because now we have this strange phenomenon happening in our country, and our youth, our young women are being exposed to this situation. And I think it might also be because we're not financially literate. We might not have been taught. My parents did not tell me, where does money come from? How do I hold on to money? How do I prepare myself for the future? I remember when I was in school, there wasn't enough money for the tuck shop. Okay, so all the kids run to the tuck shops, né? It must now break. Everybody wants that. I couldn't really buy what I wanted.
Yeah.
So what happened to me? I started selling knickknacks
Aha.
secretly. And I started, hustling these knickknacks.
Yes.
But then, on a Friday or during the week, I was able to buy that hamburger that I wanted. I
Aha.
was trying to learn how does this work.
Yeah.
And my dad made this wonderful observation one day, because I was asking him, how does business work? This,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
driving. I said, and he was a civil servant. He worked for Transnamib before, those days.
Yes.
And he told me, if you are able to add value to someone, or if you are able to solve a problem for someone, then you're able to have a business. And that's somehow, that's one of those conversations that for some reason in my memory always got stuck. So that's something I always think, even in my work life, if I'm able to add value to my boss,
Yeah.
or to my co-workers, it makes me valuable. So I must understand that need.
Yeah.
And that's the same with finances. I need to be able to understand how money works and flows. And money is generated when you are serving, when you are solving problems, when you're adding value to people's lives, when you're making something just a little bit less difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things like that. Because people can wash their cars at home. But now you're making it a little bit less difficult by doing it for them. And they're willing to pay.
Yeah.
Now some people make it even more less difficult by going to their house to do it.
Yes.
So now that comfort, it's just making it more and more comfortable.
Yeah.
But then what we do with the money is so important, because now I get this influx of cash. And in Namibia, I get so sad because we tend to want to please people who don't care about us and buy things that we don't need, and we impress no one.
It's true. It brings me to the question where you spoke about the tuck shop. And that led, you took that situation and you created a positive something out of it, because now you found a solution to the problem that you had, but it was a positive one, because I have no idea where you got the money to buy the knickknacks in the first place, though.
My parents helped. So, that's where the parents come in, if it's possible.
Yeah.
But you also have to use the money you make to buy your stock.
So at least the first injection that came
Yes.
from your parents. Now it brings me to that question. At what age can we actually, because I'm thinking tuck shop, primary school, high school, at what age can one actually start the financial education at home with a child?
What a beautiful question. So children start learning very strongly from the age of 3 or 4. They start absorbing. So my wife is an educational specialist, and you just see at the early childhood development, that's where you need to be in everything.
Yeah.
So Namibia now is making a concerted effort through government to ensure there are ECD centers, to ensure that it becomes regulated in the future, to
Yeah.
ensure that we improve the quality thereof, to ensure that there's a food program at that level. Because they know that at that level, if we don't solve a child's learning problem, my wife always says, the way a child leaves ECD and enters school is the way they will perform in matric.
Wow.
That sets your matric results when we
Yeah.
still had matric, or
Yeah.
now grade 11. So
That's a confusing one.
it's
on
a confusing
own.
one on its own. So that's not my field, but
Yeah.
it means that, in my opinion, financial literacy to some extent starts at 3 or 4. And I'm not talking about difficult concepts
Yeah,
about profit and this and that,
Yeah.
but it starts with concepts around money doesn't come from everywhere. There's a limited supply of money always.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to understand it. I need to also understand currency, because that's how most people learn about money. It's about the currency aspect. So now what I really appreciate in the public schools now very much, they push entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And I think that's a great endeavor.
Yes.
So my kids, one is now in grade 1 and grade 2, and they had entrepreneurship days.
That's nice.
And my little girl, she had one 2 weeks ago. And we were talking about what she's doing, and so my boy said, yes, Daddy, so that means that if you bought it for this much, then you have to add this much, so that you can make a little profit. And I was like,
Wow.
we did that 2 months ago, but you remember that,
Yes.
and you're able to somehow think about it and apply it, and it makes me realize that we forget what it means to be children. When we are children, we are so absorbed of what's available to us, and we're able to make so many choices that could potentially help us. I know in America, for example, and this is not a good trend, it's just an example,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people going online and making money online, young ones. and they are making a success of their lives. Now, in Namibia, I wouldn't support that.
Yeah.
We are not a mature enough nation to protect our children from that.
Yeah, yeah.
But children have the ability to create small little businesses or have the ability to understand money. And they are able to say that if I get a bit of pocket money, I'm able to save some for later. That should be something that we teach them already. Now, not all children in Namibia get pocket money. We must now remember this as well. Not everybody has access to finances, but people have access to resources. So when children are supplied with something, whether now in a rural or urban setup, when they are given opportunity, we should be able to teach them the value of trading.
Yes.
So when I do SME training, small and medium enterprise training, there's always a fight about there isn't access to finances. I can't get a loan, I don't have collateral. I don't have family or a historical context now to give me this money, which is available in other countries.
Yeah.
So what do I do? And one of the topics I always teach them about is bartering. If you don't have money, it's fine. Give what you can. And we've had significantly great stories that I couldn't give you money, but can you please help me with this service that I need or this product?
Yeah.
In return, I will do this for you, which is part of my service. I can't pay you in cash, but I'll pay you in my service or my product, or partially at least.
Yeah.
And this creates a conducive environment, but we tend to not always think outside of the box or come up with creative solutions. And the reason for that is stress inhibits creative thinking. Financial stress is horrible. It eats you. You're thinking about it constantly. It creates people sitting in the workplace, but they're not working. They're thinking about these things. So now we're not creative. I can't think of a creative solution because I'm stressed.
Yeah.
Stress takes away that mental ability to be creative. And that for me is so sad because we have such a nice country, amazingly beautiful people that are so innovative, can come up with ideas. And if you look at our more traditional cultures, you can see that. So we tend to neglect our traditions, but it is in our traditions that we see the strength of our cultures, where we see the strength of our ability to innovate, come up with medicines that people didn't even know about, use what's available in nature to solve our problems. And I think when we start thinking about our money in the same vein and say, but what can I do that I haven't thought of yet?
Yeah.
Let me do some research, let me speak to people, let's get across away from this cultural taboo that we don't talk about money.
Exactly.
And somehow say, we're all in problems.
Yeah.
I can give you horrible statistics. Horrible.
Sad.
Where I can say to you, there are certain groups of people in Namibia that on average, have 5 cash loans, formal cash loans, which is added in with more. No problem with a cash loan. Sometimes you don't have time for the bank to approve it, so you want to take a cash loan, but if you take it for a productive purpose, to grow your business, or you need it now for a client or something, or you can grow it into something, and that growth that you have is more than the interest that you're paying, you might be able to validate it.
Yeah.
But you cannot validate it if it's money that goes to nothing.
That's the thing.
And that is what we need to start looking at and moving away from. So we need to make, what is the right word? We need to make healthy decisions on these aspects.
Yeah. I like the fact that you mentioned something very simplistic. And in my mind, it kind of takes me, it's as if we can consider going back to where it started. You mentioned bartering. This is how the world used to function. We didn't have money how many thousands of years ago, and bartering was, the system, even within our own country itself. That is how, we got things and functioned. So I never thought about it, bartering for services and, even money, because I give you a particular service, you give me this much. It's also a form of bartering. So I like that once we talk about it, it helps to open up the mind to the possibility of what is out there as solutions to the problems. Now, you spoke about stress that can be brought on by finances. And it's quite sad, as you're saying, that it can lead to some of these psychological issues that we have as well. But now we have the case where people talk about credit, because this is the other thing that, sometimes catches us off as individuals, where if you don't have credit, then financial institutions have issues with you. If you do have credit, it can be an issue as well. So what is credit, and what is the difference between good and bad credit?
So let's use an analogy. It's a good, the way you frame the question, it makes it very difficult. Okay, so let's compare credit to food.
Okay.
Food is good,
Okay.
unless it's abused or you eat the wrong food.
Ah.
Then you become either unhealthy
Yeah.
or overweight, and we grow the kapunda, it gets out of hand. So we need to understand food.
Yeah.
What is good for me and what is not. Now, money is exactly the same, or credit. When I borrow money, it should be for productive purposes. So what does that mean? It means that I'm able to take what I borrow and increase it
Okay.
at a higher rate than what I'm paying interest.
Okay.
So if I'm borrowing money from a bank, let's say at $10,000 at an interest rate of 10% for 1 year. So after 12 months, that $10,000, I must pay back $11,000. That means I should be able to take that $10,000 and increase it by more than $1,000 so that I can pay that interest of $1,000, but the extra I make is in my favor. If we don't do that, there is no real value. So people always also believe that property investment is the best investment, and for many years it was, because the price of properties grew much faster than the interest that you would pay.
Yeah.
But then, there were a lot of things that happened in our economy, and there was COVID, and there's Ukraine and everything.
Yeah.
So now the property prices isn't rising as quickly as they used to in the past, and so now you have to question yourself, well, is it still as good an investment as it used to be?
Yeah.
So when you borrow money, it should be for productive purposes. I always say the worst debt that you have is for clothes and weddings, and to be honest, and please, those in the audience, please forgive me, for funerals. We tend to spend so much money on funerals, and I like it when I have the discussion, I'm told, no, but it's our culture. And I said, really, I'm thinking 100 years ago, that wasn't the same culture. Maybe we've inherited a different culture.
Yes.
Because we're paying 30,000 for a coffin, we're paying 30,000 or more for the tombstone. We're actually, the food and the celebration, I understand. Those other items, I'm not sure how much that was part of our original cultures. And so we need to ask ourselves these questions, what am I spending my money on? However, if you save the money for that, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
The problem is we become indebted
Because
to do these things,
yeah.
which means for many years you will struggle with that debt. It takes us to other issues where we have to support other people as well.
Yeah.
So there's a topic called, I used to call it black tax. You
I
know?
also call it black
You
tax.
call it black? I was told I'm not allowed to call it black tax
No, I'm
anymore.
very honest. I call it black tax.
No, my honourable deputy minister told me, Mr. Brandt, at the FLI 10-year anniversary, she said, Mr. Brandt, from now on we'll call it Pan-African tax. I
Okay.
said, are we? Okay, I'm with you.
Okay.
So that means we call it a tax because it costs us something.
Yeah.
But it's a very good part of our culture. It is to support those back home. Those who've invested you to become successful, you help back. Okay? The problem is, and it's only anecdotal, 30% of the people we constantly help become dependent on us. We don't do it in a way that makes them independent and sustainable.
Yes.
So we create a dependency cycle. Number one. Number two, we do it in a way that indebts us.
Yeah.
Which means, because I will become over-indebted, it means at some stage, everybody will suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
But if I'm able to secure my finances and become strong in a financial position, I will be able to, even more than in the past, support there. And there's nothing wrong with this culture to support and to help. That is a very good trait, and I think that makes us in a better position than many other countries in the world. But if we don't do so responsibly, we end up poor. We might look rich with the car and the job and the house, which is all indebted, and my 5 cash loans that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
And then we talk about our suicide rate in Namibia.
Thank
There
you.
comes a stage where you don't have any solutions anymore.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful about this and find a very good and striking balance. But good credit is credit that I take to make it more.
Yeah.
Bad credit is that I take and it becomes nothing.
Yeah.
It disappears into the into the ground, or into food, or into into clothing or into something else. There is a discussion whether taking a loan for school is good or bad. I would say it's better to save up because there's an interest associated, especially with the short-term loans.
Yeah.
But schooling in some sense is an investment
Okay.
because that person that gets schooled is able to earn more.
Yeah.
So you
yeah.
can see that, again, it's that return on investment. Is it more than what that loan cost you? What is the lifetime value of that? If that person is schooled and qualified and they can get a job, it means they will never be a dependent anymore.
Exactly.
So you're creating that growth. So I think there are different ways to look at it, but bad credit for me it's a big problem we have in Namibia. There's so much stress on people currently for the over-indebtedness that they have. So let's say a person is 300,000 in debt.
Yeah.
What was it for? Where did that money go?
Very good question. And I like the point that you're bringing back to the most basic analogy that we have on the ground. Teach the man how to fish instead of just giving them fish. For example, where you are supporting this person with their education or something, that to me, translates into teaching the person how to fish. Instead of constantly just giving them money for...
It's a very good. I also use that in the past a lot. And then my one friend said, "But Francois, it's not about teaching a man to fish. Teach that man to teach others to fish, and you will feed a nation."
Thank you. It's like a trickle down or a ripple effect where this was done for me, I can do it for somebody else once
Yes.
I get to that capability.
Indeed.
And it's sad because you find somebody, as you're talking about the whole bad credit situation, where you'll find somebody there in a fix and they decide, okay, let me quickly run to a cash loan or to the bank or whatever. And the minute the person get that finances, somebody knocks on the door and say, I need ABCD. There goes that money, meaning that problem still sits that they had, that money is gone, and they're in debt. So it's those little things that we really need to start considering, looking at whether, I think the other thing that we also need to teach ourselves, I believe, it's the need and want concept.
Very important.
Where you look at something and you ask yourself, do I really need it or do I just want it? And when I do need it, how have you been surviving without it? Did you have an alternative? Or did you not have an alternative at all? I mean, these are the three mental questions that one, or I believe I try and practice, even when you're in a shop trying to buy something. Yes, anyway, let me not do all the talking here. Please, you're welcome to join us in this conversation. Our lines are also open for you to call us in the studio, and our number is 061, that's the area code, and the number here is 400-397, 400-397. You can give us a call in the studio if you've got any comment or question that you can pose here to Mr. Brandt. And then also please be reminded that you can also do the same on our social media platforms. You can drop us in the comment section a question or your statement or your contribution. And on Facebook, you can find us at the Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, Republic of Namibia. Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, Republic of Namibia. We are also on YouTube, and our handle there is MICT Namibia, MICT Namibia. While we wait for you to join the platforms and the conversation, I have another question here for Mr. Brandt. What is an emergency fund, and who should actually consider tapping into this?
So in Namibia, I would say every adult must have an emergency fund.
Okay.
It's because we don't have emergency funds that we run to the short-term loans.
Okay.
That we have to pay how much interest.
Yeah.
And I mean, everywhere I go, they tell me 30% interest,
Yeah.
25, and I'm like, it is killing us. It's killing us to pay this high interest. So an emergency fund is to avoid that.
Okay.
It is when there is a death in the family, when there is a funeral, where there is a unforeseen problem with your vehicle, or something happened at school and the uniform was stolen, you have to buy a new uniform, or textbooks. It is in those situations that you have to delve into your emergency fund so that you don't become over-indebted.
Okay.
And that emergency fund is normally held in cash. It's not even in a 32-day, it's something that's more readily available. So it's in a savings account, it's somewhere safe. It's something that you can dip your hand into instead of going to a loan when something happens. Now the good thing about having an emergency fund is it tends to grow in time if you don't use it.
Ah.
So then you start saying, okay, but let me take half of this and put it into an investment now.
Okay.
Because I only need, let's say, 5,000 or 2,000 in my emergency fund. So every time you go over that, you can then say, okay, let me start taking this, put it in investment. Let me take it, put it in investment. And this is something that helps stimulate the growth. So I would say a very good first step for everybody in Namibia, because we have this bad habit of running to the loan,
Yeah.
is have a small emergency fund somewhere so that you can just prevent that every time. If you can just do that, you will save yourself 30% of whatever you borrow every time. And that already puts you in a stronger position than most people.
Yeah, yeah. So, in your opinion, one easily accessible one, but yet with a potential of growth, would be a savings account.
I would say for most Namibians who are struggling,
Yeah.
they don't have any savings. It's difficult to even think about investments if you don't save.
Yeah.
Okay, now I always say we hack ourselves. What does that mean? It means I know my own behavior is so poor, I'm not saving. Even when I save, I use it immediately. Okay, so because I know this, we hack ourselves, and I've learned this. So we say, I'm going to use a 32-day account because I know if I take that money out immediately, I'm paying a penalty. Or I put my money into the lamp post.
Yeah.
Because I have to go in to take it.
Yeah.
So it's an effort. So at night when I'm out partying and I need that money, I can't go and just take it. It's stuck somewhere. So we do this in a way to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
We hack ourselves because we struggle with our behavior.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, we have to find ways that we do this.
Okay.
So I'm thinking savings and credit cooperatives seem to be a good vehicle for communities and families. But I'm also thinking a savings account with a debit order. So when you get your salary, you have a debit order on your checking account that automatically transfers, or it not even need to be a debit order, it needs to just be an automatic transfer to your savings account. Or into a long-term investment product like a unit trust or mutual fund that you cannot touch unless giving a 2 month, 6 months or 1 year notice. Okay? Then you know that money stuck there, I can never touch it.
Yes,
That's a way to protect us from saying, let me just take it. I want to go to, it's December, I didn't save enough, it's time to go to this, it's time to go to Swakop.
Yes.
Let me just dip into that. It's not even an emergency, it's not a need.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
a
want.
want. Exactly.
So we somehow find ways to protect ourselves. But at the basic, and that's why it's also difficult to give a black and white answer.
Yes, yes.
Because if you earn very little, if you're a domestic worker, you're a security guard, you're a farm worker, you earn so little, putting it into a savings account, your bank charges
Exactly.
will not help you. It's actually, I know so many people that stop using their account
Yeah.
because they get paid their 1,500. When they go to the bank account, there's 1,200. It's so little and then you get so less.
Yeah.
So for them, it might be worthwhile thinking of other options.
Yeah, yeah.
Back in the day, we had other banks available that seemed to be a bit better. So we need to start thinking, what are the other options available, and what can we do about this? So I think we have to be very careful in our analysis of this works for everybody, but I need to find out what works for me.
Yeah.
And this comes back to what you said. We need to start talking about it.
Yeah.
So I need to see who is doing it well.
Yes.
And let me just hope that they're willing to talk to me. Are they willing to share? Because maybe we're also so jealous, man.
That's the thing.
Something that works for me, I don't want to share it because that person might become more successful than me. We are so funny people.
Yes, but it's
If we all benefit,
it's sad.
if we all benefit, the entire nation becomes prosperous. But we tend to want to keep it for ourselves, because maybe that person will now become more successful and then I'm left behind and we're a strange nation, but it also comes from a history of heartache and pain and jealousy, and we're not making it. So if I'm making it, I don't want to tell anybody.
Exactly.
So I think let's start talking about it. If you see somebody successful, have at least the guts to ask.
Yeah.
If they don't want to talk about it, it's fine. But 1 in 10 might talk about it. I've been very, very fortunate. Not everybody talks, but there were some that talk, and especially if you have access to the internet. And I'm so grateful for our government investing so much for internet to be available nationwide, even though the costs are still a bit expensive compared to other countries, but at least it's accessible in such a big country with a low population. We've done amazing things as a country. People don't understand the investment it takes to get that coverage. So yes, there is still too much cost, but if you have access to the internet, I'm telling you, there are limitless resources. You will never be able to go through everything available, teaching you how to save, how to invest, how to grow your money, how to build self-discipline, what is financial wellness, how do I teach my kids, how do I teach my parents. How do me and my spouse get onto the same page? I
Exactly.
mean, that's the thing we don't even talk about at all, you know. And so I think there are many ways to think about it.
Speaking of talking, so what works for you?
What works for me? Oh my goodness. My secret for myself is me and my wife make decisions together always.
Okay.
And if we don't agree, we wait until we agree.
But what creates that change then?
I think I was fortunate to marry someone who had the same value than me. in
Okay.
that. So I didn't have to change her. She didn't have
Yeah.
to change me. We sort of both inherently felt that that's a good way to do things.
Yeah, yeah.
Other than that, I have a high risk profile, so I might start a worm farm
Yeah.
and it might fail. And my wife is saying, well, maybe it would have worked and then maybe it would have done something for us.
Yeah.
So I think understanding each other and supporting each other is also a great way to show that positiveness. The last one, which is very difficult for Namibians, is transparency.
Mm, mm.
She knows 100%. She knows my payslip.
Yeah.
She knows. I know her payslip. I know exactly what's happening with her and with me, and actually our things are together.
Yeah.
So we are always on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe I'm just blessed. It could be. I know that in many situations that's not the case, and
Yeah.
it creates a lot of fights and conflict. And then people think somebody's hiding money, and that. What did you do with that money? You got
Yes.
paid, but there's no money. What's happening?
Yeah.
You know, and it creates a very unhealthy culture where we start constantly thinking somebody's doing something
Yeah.
bad, and we also start lying about things, and I think
Very
that
much.
creates a very sad situation. So for me, that helps. Also, I read a lot,
Mm-hmm.
so I like reading about lots of different things, and I speak to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and a lot
yeah.
of people come to speak to me, which helps me because I'm learning from them. I'm
Yeah.
learning that they tried this and it didn't work. What can I tell them? Well, how about bartering?
Mhm.
You are very good at marketing, so go tell that person you will start a website for them. You'll run
And
it
then-
for 2 years. It will cost you $500 in cash, and then your time. But in
Yeah.
return for that person, it's worth 25,000 at least.
Exactly.
So are you able to get something then in return that will help you grow your business?
Yeah.
Maybe get your business cards, maybe get your other things. So we have to think outside of the box, and I think that helps for me.
Mm.
Is to try and be creative in a scenario where cash might not be so abundant
Mhm.
as one would have liked.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into financial literacy from what I'm picking up, because you've got what do they call it? Emotional intelligence.
Very important.
That I'm picking up. I'm picking up compromise, understanding, transparency, accountability. All of these elements kind of build into this literacy that we are referring to, that you can actually translate into positive living. Let me continue with something that you mentioned a bit earlier on, and that was interest. So now we want to find out, how does the rising interest rate affect the ordinary person on the street? And if you have any, what would be the best way to try and cope, for example, with the current economic conditions that we're finding ourselves in, especially after, I would say, the past 2 years really flipped the script on our people that had already started struggling. So this was that wrench in the wheel type of situation. And from what we're observing now, the 2 years that we thought was bad was actually not as bad as what we are facing as the aftermath thereof.
Very interesting observation, yes. So when the interest rate, the repo rate gets low, it means that to borrow at $10,000 is cheaper than what it was before.
Yeah.
So if I borrowed at 10,000, I would have paid 11,000. Now all of a sudden, I'm only required to pay 10,700. Okay, so to reduce the interest rate means people have more access to credit, which they borrow, and they buy more things. So
Yeah.
it stimulates the economy.
Yes.
Or they buy assets like vehicles, maybe not a good asset, but then property,
Yes.
start a business. Now you rise your interest rates. Now
Wow.
you're saying, okay, what happens now? All of a sudden, the credit becomes more expensive, so I cannot afford it anymore.
Yeah.
That person cannot afford it more. So there's less money to spend in the market.
Mhm.
So meaning that small businesses are struggling, most businesses are getting less income, so everybody's struggling. There might be job losses, there might be reductions in incomes. But now on the other side as well, those who took out credits for properties or cars, or took out a personal loan for other areas that they wanted money for, now all of a sudden, instead of paying that, let's say normally you would have paid per month 2,000. Now all of a sudden you have to pay 2,200 maybe. So all of a sudden that 200 is not available for other things you would have spent it on.
Yeah.
And this cost of credit that now all of a sudden is so high, much higher than what it used to be, coupled with the fuel prices, means that you have less money to spend on your children's education,
Yeah.
your food, medicine, things that fluctuate from month to month.
Yeah.
Because you're stuck with your transport, whether it's taxi or whether it's fuel. You're stuck with your loans, you're stuck with your rent, you're almost stuck with your electricity and water. You can't save that much. You can bring it down 10, 20, maybe 30%, but still it's a chunk.
Yeah.
So what else can you save on? That's your communication, it's your children's education, it is your clothing, it's your food, things that actually is difficult.
Yeah.
So this rise in interest rates means that those who have credit have less money to spend. Those who don't have, or who still wanted to take credit now can't afford it anymore, so there's less money to spend in the market. So less properties are being built,
Yeah.
less construction, less vehicle sales. So this creates a reduction in economic growth. So if you wanted to start a small business, it's a difficult time.
Yeah.
People have less money to spend on, I don't know what you're going to sell. Are you going to import Mupani worms? You're going to add syrup and make it very nice, and now all of a sudden you want to think there's a market. People have less money to spend on takeaways, or less money to spend on new tastes, you know, because the taste is a want. And you have to be careful then on the money available in the market. So I think we have to understand that when credit is cheaper,
Yeah.
don't over-indebt yourself, because it will eventually go up again.
Exactly.
And then you're in trouble.
Exactly. As you said at the beginning, this is one of those topics that we will never finish talking about. It's it's like what do they call it? An open, unlimited tab. But time is never on our side, so we'll push as far as we can to try and make sure that we educate as much as possible. This brings me to my next question. How widely is financial literacy taught in Namibia? At what level? And also, you know, in the same vein, are our corporate institutions involved in these efforts of financial education? And to what extent, maybe?
So let's look at it from two perspectives.
Yes.
One is there are some financial organizations, some banks, some insurance companies, some investment companies, some cash loans that actually take some of their money to educate people.
Okay.
You know, so they spend some time. Normally it's within the confines of their products, which is a little bit like marketing,
Yeah.
but it's not always limited to that. They touch the aspects about budgeting, about saving, about planning, tracking your expenses, very important aspects within those confines. But the financial industry as a whole is supporting, to some extent, the financial literacy initiative, which started in 2012. It's FLI in short. So this is where I got involved. I was the manager of the initiative for 5 years, and we built it up at that stage to be a world-class initiative. We tracked and we did surveys and research. We attuned our programs to needs.
Yeah.
And at that stage already, we made sure that we involve financial literacy at early childhood development, through primary school, through secondary school. We even ran a stock exchange trading game with the stock exchange at the tertiary level for students.
Okay.
So we wanted to take it through everywhere.
Yeah.
The FLI also has wellness programs for workplaces. They conduct trainings for MSMEs.
Yeah.
And some more. So financial literacy through the financial literacy initiative is available countrywide.
Okay.
There are some other NGOs that's also conducting some sorts of financial literacy. In the market you have organizations, maybe I shouldn't name them now, but there's some faith-based and then some just standard non-profit organizations that go out into the community and give people financial education. So there are things available if you start looking, but the FLI is the national initiative. They've got thousands of booklets for free and posters and resources online. It's a great resource if you want to start. They also have monthly public talks that they invite an expert in the industry to talk about investment, savings, insurance, or something like that. So they can also be reached out as well. Their offices are there in town, so it's quite easily accessible, close to the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
And they are there to then serve and provide information with regards to this.
And with the FLI, that's where I want to stay with now. Clearly, it was a need that was identified through the efforts that were made. But now, the question then comes from the man on the street. Can I just walk into their offices and ask for assistance with regards to this, or do I need to make appointments for that matter? And also, for example, if, let's say, you've got a company that wants to, through their wellness and so on, programs or activities, they want to have, let's say, financial education or literacy education, sorry, whichever, for their employees. Do they then need to pay for these services or sessions? What is the operational,
So-
requirements around FLI?
So the FLI is a public initiative, so it's for the public. So it is, however, a sustainable type of initiative. They get funding from government and from the private sector, and together they have a budget per year. So their booklets, for example, on savings, budgeting, insurance, investment, written in a way that's easier to read and understand,
Yeah.
is available for free to the public. So the
Okay.
public can go and just get them. They are also at expos and trade fairs where they can engage and get these booklets. So that's a primary source.
Yeah.
Then they provide these services to government for curriculum revision, to have that. So that's also done at their cost. But there is sometimes a cost for micro, small and medium enterprises to get a SME training,
Okay.
unless it's sponsored.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are sponsors. FLI was very strongly supported by several institutions over the years. So not all the banks are part of FLI, not all insurance companies, not all investment companies. So
Yeah.
people can go on their website and see who are what we call the platform supporters of
Mm.
FLI and supports it financially. But yeah, most of what's available is for free. Wellness programs, I think, is limited to those who are official platform supporters. So you can be any company and become a supporter of FLI. And then one of the benefits or the perks is that they come and they train your staff. They take them
Okay.
through a program, which
Yeah.
I think is quite amazing. So so these things are then mostly freely available. The public talks are for free, and so forth.
Now, besides FLI and what they provide, are there other places that maybe you can highlight that an individual, whether it's myself or somebody on the street, or just the general person, that maybe they can approach for assistance or help with regards to financial education?
Okay, so financial education per se, that FLI, and that is some materials available at some of these financial institutions, the internet, libraries, books, people, some non-profit organizations. But when it comes to what we sometimes want is we want financial advice. In addition to being educated how to invest, I want somebody to tell me where to invest.
Yes, yes.
Or what insurance do I need to take?
Yeah.
That's where you should go to a financial advisor that's registered, or a financial broker
Yes.
who has access to all the information.
Okay.
Because those who educate do not necessarily advise.
Yes.
And I think we have to make that distinction. So I think the one area that we definitely have a problem is we have no counselors.
Yeah.
There's no financial or debt counselors in this country, not one. And we're an over-indebted country,
Yeah. I know.
the general person. So how do we deal with that? Now, they normally go to social workers
Yeah.
or psychologists or even their bank or branch manager and see what they can do. And so in that way, they're trying to get the information that they can, and that helps them to make change.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we should start thinking about talking to our elders,
Yeah.
because our elders do things better than us.
Yeah,
I can
that's
promise
also
you
true.
that they've learned how to survive in very difficult times. We are growing up in better times than what they did.
Yeah.
So if we want to learn how to do it, I would advise go speak to our elders, go sit around the fire and listen to them, bring up the topic,
Yeah.
ask them, how did you survive during those days?
Yeah.
How did you save? How did you actually buy your car? And I think that's where it's a very good source for us.
Okay, with that, I believe we are coming closer to the end of our session this afternoon. But I would like, Mr. Brandt, what are your last remarks that you would want, to leave the nation with?
Generally, Namibians have poor financial behavior. However, starting small by saying, for example, and anything small, it's just the first step. Every time I buy something and I get change, I put that change somewhere. It will become my saving fund, my emergency fund.
Yeah.
Just that alone will start instigate behavior. And there's a phenomenon around the world called mindfulness. Mindfulness is a phenomenon where you say, I track my behavior. I write down every expense that I make, whether it's a toffee, whether it's a taxi fare, whether it is lunch, whether it's my rent. Every single expense must be written down. That alone, only doing that will already help you make better decisions. It will automatically turn into a better behavior. Just the fact that you are mindful of it.
Wow.
And so I would advise that we start with something small like that, because that alone already makes a difference in our lives.
Wow. Wow. Definitely something to take home with, mindfulness. It's a simple concept, but I believe from what I'm picking up or taking away, it goes a long way. It creates the phenomenon of small steps, yet to a bigger goal. With that, Mr. Brandt, thank you very much for availing your time to come and help us discuss this very important topic. As we said, it's something that really we don't talk about, yet the conversation is needed to assist us to come out of the holes of debt that we seem to be stuck in, especially as a nation as small as Namibia when we speak to population. One other thing that I also picked up that maybe can be considered as an educational option, or what do you call it? Yeah, career option. Financial counselors. That's also something I picked up. I never knew that we don't have any at all in the country. So something that somebody out there can consider, financial counseling. It is a career option. So as we always say, it's an educational platform that we have here. We learn something and we teach something, we are taught something. And with that, I thank you very much for availing your time to be with us this afternoon having that 5 seconds can actually go a long way in educating you in certain things that you might not have known. From myself, Shianwa Desire Kahiha, along with my production crew, have a good afternoon.